Hello, family members. Hope you're having a nice day today. This is an open letter to Natalie Wynn, aka ContraPoints. ContraPoints is one of the foundational YouTubers in video essays and all of that, and definitely helped popularize commentary YouTube outside of like right-wing circles in the like mid 2010s. Now, personally, that's not when I became aware of her. I probably came into the Natalie Wynn fandom, such that it is, uh, after she'd been canceled maybe a couple of times already, to be honest. She has been a controversial figure for quite some time and has had a string of public missteps, shall we say, that she was criticized probably disproportionately for along the way. But her current troubles, such that they are, seem to be with leftists, which is kind of funny because people who are outside of these circles see her as sort of an avatar of lefty YouTube. But she's not, and she's never been, and that's sort of the problem. Now, as I've kind of briefly mentioned, ContraPoints has a lot of haters online. I'm not one of them. I'm coming at this from a place of good faith and respect, and honestly, I see a lot of value in ContraPoints. I believe that her video essay titled Twilight, which is, I mean, I guess it is about Twilight, but it's about so much more than just Twilight. It's about human relationships on a very fundamental level, and romance, and how we tell stories about romance and human relationships. And one of the things that I'll never forget is that in that video, she takes the time to consider the aromantic perspective. I mean, that's just amazing. Like, it's one of the best videos that have ever been made on YouTube. I'm not joking. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it, even if you have no care at all about Twilight, because again, it's not about Twilight. It's using Twilight as a jumping off point to discuss so much more. And so obviously, when I say things like that, you understand that I'm coming at this from a perspective of deep respect for Natalie Wynn. I believe that she is a very intelligent woman who has contributed greatly to the culture in a lot of ways. And I feel like right now, the sort of trouble that she's got herself in may end up overshadowing a lot of the important ideas that she has brought, and contributions she has brought to all of us. And so I'm hoping to make the case to her, although I doubt that she'll ever hear this, that there is a way forward for her, and I don't think she's on the right path. So I can't get into all of the ContraPoints controversies, and they're not really relevant here. What I'm really here to talk about is her first kind of wishy-washy, non-committal comments on current events, sort of post October 7th of a few years ago, when people really started seeing and talking and thinking about what was happening in the Middle East differently. And at the time, I believe there was a fairly strong cultural shift in most of the left leaning at least YouTube circles. Most of the creators that I watched then and now went out of their way to show support to Gaza. And the fact that she didn't was something that people were immediately critical of. And I felt at the time too critical of. I think now that maybe they were seeing a few steps ahead than I was. I was maybe giving a little bit too much of a benefit of the doubt there. But at the time, to me, it seemed like she hadn't really said that much, and focusing on her so much seemed sort of out of place. It is difficult when you talk about people like Natalie or any big YouTuber that has a large platform. You know, they have that because of the people that watch them. And they were given sort of a voice that allows them to be more effective than any one of us individually as watchers, right? And so I feel like a lot of people believe that in giving that platform, there is an implication that it'll be used wisely. And a lot of people really believe that if you have a platform and you have a voice, you can't be using it wisely if you're not speaking out against the genocide in Gaza. And so anyone who doesn't look at things that way is going to run into people who are going to criticize them very vocally. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'll be honest. I think that maybe it's good. It's not something that I personally would do. But I don't know. People who want to see the people that step up and say, hey, I have something important to say, listen to me, use the position they're given for good purposes. Someone who's out there, a contingent that's going to hold you to some extent accountable, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It can go too far and it can be unhealthy, but I don't know that it's necessarily all bad. I am certain that emotionally it is extremely hard to deal with that kind of criticism. I recently kind of went on a little run on Threads and then realized that, nah, this isn't to me. Again, it's a Twitter thing. I don't think it's really for me. But, I said something controversial, I suppose, and got some people who were very unkind, and it didn't feel good. I understand to a very minor degree somewhat what she's got to be feeling, and realize that wasn't something that I ever really wanted to experience again. And kind of said, yeah, I think I know what mediums I like and work for me. And one where you're kind of inviting people to come at you that directly maybe isn't what I need, you know? And maybe she doesn't either, but, seems like that's where she puts herself sometimes. I mean, I haven't really come out and said it yet, but this is the fundamental problem, is that she was held up as the avatar of leftist YouTube, and she's not a leftist. She is a centrist. And I think part of the reason I feel such connection to her on this, probably parasocially, is because I was there too. It wasn't that long ago, maybe a few years now, when I was a lot more centrist than I am now. I think that's kind of common. I think there's a lot of people who were pretty much, like kind of Libby centrist types that within the last few years have moved more leftist. And because there's a lot of things going on right now that could, radicalize a person, right? And I think that's where we've run into troubles, is that a lot of her fan base was on the same page as her as far as the centrism went. And then the last few years, they have left that behind, and she's still in the same place. When I was watching some interviews of her, some clips, I didn't watch the full interviews, to full disclosure, but I was watching some clips of her recent interviews. I was struck by something she said she said that people often think that her not speaking out pro-Palestine is like a courage issue, but that's not it. She's just saying what she believes. She thinks that people who criticize her, have a wisdom issue. And I was like, oh, does ContraPoints have rich person disease? Is that what happened? That was my first thought, which is disappointing. Now, if you don't know what I mean by rich person disease, it's not like a widespread term. It's something that I use. It's when someone has enough power and influence that they can kind of live in a little bit of a bubble, and they don't hear criticisms from people who they don't want to hear criticisms from. And so their positions can become a little out of touch, and sometimes a lot of out of touch. And I think that's possibly what's going on here. I'm not certain. It's certainly quite a thing to say that the people who disagree with you have a wisdom issue. That's a polite way of saying that you think that they're uninformed and ignorant, and that you know better than they do. And that's a hell of a thing to say. That's, whew. Girl, if you don't look back on that comment and go, what the F was I thinking? Then you might genuinely have the rich person disease. If you don't look back on that and go, oh, that was another one of my mistake moments. Oh, well, I've got to do better than that next time. If you don't realize the fundamental problem in dismissing people who disagree with you as just being ignorant, I don't know that I can help you. I'm sorry. And then there was another thing where she was talking about J.K. Rowling. And the first time I saw it, the first part of it was clipped out, and I thought she was talking about herself, because she was saying that she was talking about someone who was smart, said something dumb on the internet, got a lot of pushback, and then didn't handle it poorly. And it honestly sounded very much like she was talking about herself. I don't know how she's done that, how she's become that much in common with J.K. Rowling, but I guess she has, If you are watching this, Natalie, I want to say to you something that is a sort of a paraphrase from Neil deGrasse Tyson. This isn't my thought. I don't want to take credit for it. He said something to the effect of, just because something sounds right doesn't mean it's true. I think you've probably made some really great arguments to yourself in your head for your positions. I am asking you to step back and humble yourself. And so I'm sure you're not watching this video, but if you're probably like, nah, I'm out. I mean, what a thing to say to someone, humble yourself. I feel like a jerk saying it. I really do. But I had to do the same thing, Natalie. After October 7th, I kind of checked out, you know. We were seeing all this stuff on mainstream media about how Hamas had done all these awful things on October 7th. And then the Israeli response was obviously just relentless. And for a few months, I was just like, it's too much. I can't think about it. There's too much on both sides and da da da. I had a very centrist mindset on the issue. And then I watched Sean's video on Palestine. And I realized that it wasn't as complicated as I thought it was. We are talking about a apartheid colony that has been propped up by external Western powers for, decades here. We're not talking about an ancient, unsolvable problem. We're talking about Israel, which is a real place with a real history. It's not a philosophical thing. It is a real place. And its real actions can be criticized. You can move beyond any philosophical both sidesism you might get stuck on, because reality exists. There is such a lopsided power balance here. We're talking about an occupying force and a native people who don't have nearly the same type of resources and have suffered horrendous violent action after violent action after violent action after violent action. I don't believe in apartheid. I just don't. I don't believe that apartheid states can ethically exist. I've read Trevor Noah's book about growing up as an illegal child in an apartheid state. Race is not a biological fact. And you can't segregate people by race because they won't be segregated by race. You'll always have people from other races falling in love with each other, becoming friends with each other, being neighbors with each other. So I just cannot, on a fundamental level, believe that an apartheid state like Israel can exist without having to enforce that violently in unethical and unnecessary ways. It's not right. It's not ethically right, and it can never be ethically right. And so the answer cannot be legally enforced segregation. It just can't in any country. And I think that belief structure is at odds with ContraPoints' centrist ideology. And that's where the true conflict lies. It's a immovable rock and an irresistible force, in a way. Centrists often believe that you need to find middle ground and that you need to think practically. And this is something that I used to find very appealing. I will say. It makes sense. But I think that the presidency of Joe Biden proves that it's not true. There were a lot of really bad things that Trump did during his first term that Joe Biden did not undo. And times when they've had enough political power in, say, Obama's term or Biden's term, things like abortion, marriage equality, things that needed to have been codified when we had the chance weren't. If you look at the statistics, what politicians do, what Congress does not match up with what people want. The system that we have is not working. And it is not going to work. It can't meet the moment. And if there's not a major change in either our party structure or the Democratic Party, we are doomed to no progress, stagnation, things possibly getting worse and worse. When you look at the numbers of who voted in 2020 versus 2024, Donald Trump's vote totals are pretty close. They're not exact, but it's pretty close. The big difference why Harris lost when Biden won is a lot less people voted, period. The amount that she lost by is pretty analogous to the difference between the amount of people that voted in 2020 versus 2024. The Democratic Party was unable to convince those people who came out in 2024 to help vote Trump out and Biden in to come out again. They had their chance. Those people came out and voted that first time, and then they lost them. And I don't think that truth has been owned by the Democratic leadership. Right now, the Democratic Party is trying to hide their postmortem on the 2024 election, even though they promised that they would release it. They don't want their voters to know why they lost. They know, but they don't want us to know. Why would they do that? Because they know that the reasons they lost are their fault, and they don't want to have to take accountability, and they don't want to have to change. I firmly believe the reason why Donald Trump won in 2024 is because centrists like ContraPoints in the Democratic Party took all those voters that came out in 2020 for granted. They believe that and she said what people should do is vote. And you have to convince them to vote, ContraPoints. You have to give them a reason to vote. Just saying vote enough is not enough to motivate enough people to be able to win elections. It's just not enough. The Democratic Party honestly is better than the Republican Party, but not by enough on its own to get enough votes to win. And we've seen that in 2026, or 2016 and 2024. Being the lesser of two evils is not enough to motivate people to vote for you in the numbers that we need. The Democrat Party has to convince their base to vote, not just on the basis that they are slightly better than Donald Trump, but on the basis that they're actually going to get things done that people want done. And they cannot or will not commit to that. I don't know what's going to happen. I am very concerned about what's going to happen with the Democrat Party, because if nothing happens, if it just chugs along the way things are, we are not going to see any sort of improvement. The right wing is going to keep being, more and more empowered, because they are giving their base something to vote for. It's all lies, but they're giving them something to vote for, a vision to vote for. And I just don't see why people like Hassan Piker have captured ContraPoints' interests so greatly. I've heard Hassan speak on ContraPoints. I've watched some clips of that, and he's pretty respectful of her. I think he kind of has the same point of view on her as I do, that she's a very intelligent woman who's said some very important things and has a really bad outlook on the Democrat Party and the leftist contingency that would like to help shape the Democrat Party. The problem is that there are both centrists and leftists in the Democrat Party, and we have to figure out how to craft a party that can speak for both contingencies. And I feel like centrists often are dismissive of leftists because they think they're impractical and want things that can't be done and respond to every little thing. And it's not, you don't need to do that, Natalie. You don't need to respond to every little thing, but somebody does. Every issue is an issue to who it's important to. Like, it may not be that important to other people whether or not SNAP is widely available, but it's important to people like me who are disabled, right? You don't have to necessarily care about that in a day-to-day sense, but I am going to, right? That's maybe not a good example. SNAP is something that's not that niche, but I couldn't think of a better example. I apologize. But I'm just saying, like, accept that people are going to put intention and time and energy into things that you don't think are that important, but that doesn't mean that it isn't important. It may not be for you to put your energy in, but it doesn't mean that nobody needs to be putting their energy in. I have learned a lot about not putting my voice first in everything. It's really hard not to do that. To feel like if something isn't something you feel like you need to respond to, that nobody needs to respond to it. Just because I wouldn't criticize certain people for saying certain things doesn't mean that nobody should. We are a collective mass of individual consciousnesses trying to work together in the world. And it's important that we allow that to happen. I'm running out of time. I just want to say, again, lots of respect for ContraPoints, lots of respect for people who are centrists. Do the work, listen to us. It's challenging, it's hard. Please listen to people that you disagree with, because you may not change your mind, but you'll probably learn something. I think my video's probably stopped recording now, but if it hasn't, I just want to say thank you, family members. Have a great day, and I will talk to you later.